So, Amphoreus' latest Trailblaze mission, Light Slips the Gate, Shadow Greets the Throne, has come out strong and packed with a ton of new information, which is good considering how the whole thing is 7.5 hours long. But to be fair, it did give us a lot to talk about, since this mission not only set up the Trailblazer's inevitable death, more on that towards the end, it also served to push forward the plot by introducing 4 critical new characters, giving closure to the journey of Maidimos, along with expanding on the origins of the Flame Chase and the first of the Demigods, Tribios. Speaking of Tribios, the Black-Robed Swordsman, whom Anaxagoras calls the Flame Reaver, but whom I will refer to as NOT-Phainon, certainly lives up to his title since he is the hottest new antagonist in town, and he also happens to be the main reason behind Trianne's death, which really sucks for me because Trianne was by far my favorite out of Tribios' 3 remaining fragments. So watching her slowly and painfully exhaust all of her life force over the course of the mission to save her friends from NOT-Phainon made me want to do the following to him. All jokes aside, Hoyoverse, if you guys are watching this, please make Reaver, yeah, that's right, Flame Reaver, please make him playable. This guy is easily one of the coolest designs you have ever made, and funny enough, even if we completely ignore the eclipse symbolism on his armor and weapons, he looks exactly like how I've always imagined Rerir would look over in Genshin. So Hoyo, make the Reaver a playable character, and my life is yours. Regardless, putting aside NOT-Phainon for a bit, Light Slips the Gate, Shadow Greets the Throne really did give us a lot to work with. Just to name a couple surface ones, Cerces, the Titan of Reason, now resides in the hollow walking corpse of a dead man who split his soul using alchemy. And Mem is slowly but surely regaining her memories of the past, and oh, what intriguing information those memories appear to hide. There is more, of course, like all the new information we got about Castorice's backstory in preparation for 3.2. The plot has indeed thickened, and we have a lot to cover, which is precisely why I made this video to analyze the thickest lore reveals, then go over some details that you might have missed. Alright, since Mem is the Trailblazer's super adorable companion, I think it's best to start with her. I do have a few things to say about Mem. For instance, she seems to somehow remember NOT-Phainon, stating that both his scent and aura are familiar to her, which is very weird, since last time I checked, Mem was literally born yesterday after fully cock-blocked the Trailblazer from having sex with Kafka. Apparently those memories are too dangerous for the Trailblazer to remember, or else a new eon of propagation would be born or some shit. Instead, Fully gave us a baby rabbit to look after, and I will admit, she is very cute, but Mem doesn't remember anything about her past. And so, the only people she should know are the Trailblazer, Don Hung, and the handful of Chrysos heirs she has met so far. That being said, Cerces says something that caught my attention. She refers to NOT-Phainon as the Black-Robed Swordmaster, and the developers seem to agree with her reasoning, since the archives label him as a Swordmaster too. The game also labels NOT-Phainon as a swordsman, and amongst the few people Mem knows, the only man who happens to be called both a Swordmaster and a swordsman is Phainon. Yo, while I was editing this video, I noticed that the developers refer to the Reaver specifically as the Nameless Swordmaster and the Nameless Swordsman. I am pointing this out because when Hoyoverse revealed Phainon, they included a little text in his card which reads, "The hero remains nameless and engraves the marks of eternity." Also, I have something else to show you. Here, take a look.
Be careful.
1 slash. 2 slashes. 3 slashes are enough.
Did you guys notice what he did? He was measuring his attack. Keep in mind, Castorice and Caelus are the ones who instigated the fight there. At first, the Reaver told them to leave since they were not demigods. Now, if I was in the Reaver's place and I am on a time limit to find the 12 Titans as authorities, there is no way I would be wasting my time doing 1 cut, 2 cuts, 3 cuts on some random bozos standing in my path. I would just instantly decapitate them and move on, especially when the Reaver was at such a massive power advantage at the time. Anyway, that's all there is to add. Now back to the rest of the video where I keep calling him NOT-Phainon sarcastically. Additionally, after smelling the scent of NOT-Phainon, Mem somehow recalls a memory from the destruction of Phainon's hometown, Ides Elysiae, specifically one where NOT-Phainon backstabs Phainon's old friend, Cerine.
Killed Cyrene.
Okay, listen, I previously referred to this variation of Elysia as either Cerine or Cyrene, since those are the two most common anglicized pronunciations of Koraine. But to my surprise, Hoyoverse went with the modern Greek pronunciation Kyrini, which in English becomes Cyrene. Anyway, Mem remembering this specific memory of NOT-Phainon killing Cyrene E is a massive clue to what's going on in Amphoreus, since it belongs to Phainon. It's the same one he saw of Cyrene back when he took the trial of Nicador's Goreflame. So, Mem recalling Phainon's memory of NOT-Phainon killing Cyrene after smelling the familiar scent of NOT-Phainon, whom she never met before, would seem to suggest that Mem is somehow connected to Cyrene, while NOT-Phainon is somehow connected to Phainon. This doesn't make any sense though, because NOT-Phainon is definitely NOT-Phainon. I mean, let's be real for a moment. How could NOT-Phainon be Phainon when he represents the polar opposite of everything that Phainon stands for? After all, Phainon's mission is to fight against the Black Tide, while NOT-Phainon wields it as his weapon. Phainon is symbolized by the sun in reference to his destiny of inheriting Kefali's world-bearing core flame, and Kefali is called the Sky Father since he carries the Dawn device to light up the world in Aquila's absence. The sun brings forth dawn, so Kefali is metaphorically carrying Amphoreus' sun, while NOT-Phainon is symbolized by the crescent moon and the eclipse that blocks sunlight, engulfing the world in darkness. If you're still not convinced that NOT-Phainon isn't Phainon, then know that in the Golden Scapegoat puzzle found on Amphoreus, the Golden Goat has a shadow who follows him around, and if the two ever cross paths, then they annihilate each other and return by death to the starting point. But the Golden Goat can manipulate the Shadow Goat to help him light the flame. The goat is obviously Phainon, since Phainon is a design variant of Kevin Kaslana, who is my goat. Oh, and there's also the fact that the golden goat is depicted with a blue fire coming out of his left eye, which is the same eye that glows when we first see Phainon's face. Wait! No way! Could this mean that NOT-Phainon is actually Phainon? Yo, this changes and nah, it's probably just a coincidence. Surely there is nothing deeper to it. Before Castorice and the Trailblazer set off to scout the core flame of reason from Cerces at the Grove of Epiphany, Aglaia recounts how, according to legends, the Black Tide appeared on Amphoreus during the Era Bellica, along with the 3 Titans of Calamity, Nicador, Zagreus, and Thanatos. Of course, thanks to the Trailblazer and Castorice's encounter with Nicador, we now know that the 3 Titans of Calamity fought against the Black Tide in defense of Amphoreus, while the negative association they gained from it was largely a result of political propaganda over decades, accompanied by general public superstition. Nonetheless, the Titans of Calamity were eventually driven to madness by the Black Tide, which indiscriminately corrupted man and god alike. Living beings who are corrupted by the Black Tide are deformed and turned into hollow husks of their former selves, and the first kind of Black Tide creation we see in-game are these tide-eroded blades. Yeah, anyone who plays Zenless Zone Zero will immediately recognize these guys as the Tirfing Ether Mutants, a type of grunt monster in ZZZ that is formed by, get this, humans who are corrupted due to prolonged exposure to high etheric matter inside hollows. For the uninitiated, hollows are essentially the equivalent of the Black Tide on Amphoreus or the Abyss in Tevat. And what's funny is that one of the most effective methods to push back the Black Tide is by destroying the monsters spawned from it, which is the same way you control a hollow in ZZZ, since destroying the monsters produced by the hollow will cause it to lose etheric matter and shrink. So not only does the Black Tide create almost identical looking husks to the hollows, but their extermination methods are also similar, which indicates to us that there is some kind of major narrative parallel between the two concepts. This is definitely something to keep in mind. Both the Abyss and Hollows can be weaponized as we see in the respective games featuring them, and I wonder if it's the same case with the Black Tide. You see, Anaxagoras and Phainon speculate that NOT-Phainon wields a type of power from beyond Amphoreus, like the Black Tide, which is very interesting since he's almost certainly from Amphoreus. In case you missed it, during their initial clash, Cerces uses Anaxagoras' arm to pierce through NOT-Phainon's chest, and we get to see how his wound bleeds golden blood and radiates with golden energy, a characteristic which should be unique to Kefali's chosen deliverers who carry his divine golden blood in their veins, the Chrysos heirs. Anaxagoras also tells Phainon that NOT-Phainon is much stronger than anyone in Okhima, which includes all the Chrysos heirs currently there. This is true since he completely bodied Castorice and Caelus, and even with reinforcements from a Cerces-infused Anaxagoras, the group would have almost died without Trianne. In the end, it took the combined efforts of Amphoreus' strongest heroes, Phainon, Trailblazer, Mem, Tribi, Anaxagoras, and Maidimos, to fend off NOT-Phainon and drive him away. Keep in mind that the last three all have the power of titans inside them, since Tribios is the first demigod inheritor of the passage Titan Janus, and the reason Titan Cerces was actively helping Anaxagoras in combat, while Maidimos showed up to the fight after obtaining Nikador's core flame of strife. So yeah, NOT-Phainon is very strong, and we should expect to see him again very soon. The narrative of Light Slips the Gate, Shadow Greets the Throne has a distinct overarching theme that runs through its primary storylines, and it is the protective love of mothers. Whether it's Tribios' gentle mother whom she had long forgotten, or Maidi's mother, Gorgo, whom he never knew, both women loved their children to the very end, and in their sacrifice gave their flesh and blood the greatest gift imaginable, the strength and perseverance to keep moving forward, even long after they were gone. Now, when it comes to Maidimos' backstory with his parents Euripon and Gorgo, I saw a lot of people in my recap of Amphoreus' first Trailblaze mission asking why the developers chose to hide this important lore in random collectibles and field items which you have to fetch across the map. The answer should be obvious. The writers aligned Maidi's backstory with his release version to market the character more effectively to players. By the way, in case you didn't watch my first analysis of Amphoreus and you don't know what I am talking about, Euripon was the last king of Castrum Kremnos who went insane in his paranoia and attempted to control the Strife Titan Nikador by splitting his soul into 5 fragments, one of which is Naias, whom Caelus and Castorice meet before granting Nikador his death. If you want the full explanation, then feel free to watch it in that video. However, I do have one small correction to make. When I talked about how Queen Gorgo challenged her husband to a duel so that she could buy time for her son to defect Castrum Kremnos into Okhima, I made it sound like Maidimos was a teenager. But now we know that this is wrong, because when Euripon wanted to sacrifice Maidimos to Nikador by dropping him into the Sea of Souls, which is how Maidi became immortal, we can see that Maidi was a baby. Additionally, before reaching Okhima, the Kremnoan detachment wandered across several cities in exile for 10 years, during which Maidimos lost his 5 closest comrades one by one. Perdiccas the Potioneer was the first to fall, killed by a poisoned arrow to the stomach fired by the people of Ladon. Later, the Kremnoan detachment was hired as mercenaries to fight against the usurpers who had taken over Idonia. That's where Castorice is from. During that war, Leonius the Brave and Ptolemy the Historian both lost their lives. Pacesta the Musician met his end in Ionis when his enemies burned him alive along with the entire city. Finally, the sickly Hephaestion died bedridden, passing away before Maidimus would go on to kill the mad king Eurypon in Castrum Kremnos. All of Maidi's companions are direct references to men who served right under Alexandros of Macedon, that's Alexander the Great in freedom language. Perdiccas, Hephaestion, and Ptolemy are all the same, while Leonius is Leonatus and Psesta is Pekistas. Even old man Crateros, who abducts Trinon then tries to save Trianne from NOT-Phainon, is a reference to Crateros of Macedonia, who also served under Alexandros. The journey that Maidimos has with these men, the battles they fought, the feasts they ate, and the deaths they endured all served to shape Maidi's outlook on the Kremnoan tenet of a valorous death before glorious return. This ultimately culminates in the clash of philosophies between Maidimos and Crateros presented in the story, where Crateros cannot accept Maidi's desire to end the Kremnoan history of strife, fearing that it would ultimately eradicate their identity. But Maidi realized that this very strife his people seek is what set them on the path of slow but certain decline. Every night in his dreams, Maidimos would ask his mother why they needed to fight, and Gorgo would speak of their people's honor and the glory of the past. However, they both knew it was all a lie. The honor and glory of the past had long faded. Gorgo was wrong. Twice, actually. You see, before Eurypone threw Maidimos into the Sea of Souls, Gorgo shouted that the tiny hands of their son lack the strength to even lift a spear. How could such a child pose a threat to the king of Castrum Kremnos? Eurypone did not trust her, and threw his son into the sea to die, yet instead of death, Maidimos gained immortality. And after her son was yeeted harder than Jey Uso, Gorgo challenged her husband to a duel, in which she was poisoned and killed. Ironically, those tiny hands of her child she wanted to protect eventually returned to his mother's killer and drove a spear into his heart. Gorgo's second mistake was something she realized shortly before her own death. The real reason she fought was not for honor or glory. It was for her true legacy, Maidi, because she is his mother, his guardian, and her son was something worth protecting. And every night he saw her, that was all she ever wanted to tell him. This is an extremely simple, yet incredibly profound lesson, and it is one that Maidimos applies after claiming the core flame of strife by ending the Kremnoan dynasty and giving his people a new future, as he takes on Nikador's duty of fighting against the Black Tide, not for honor or glory, but for his people and for Amphoreus, because they are something worth protecting. So this is awkward. Normally I would crank up the epic music after the inspirational speech as a segue for the next section of the video, which in this case is about Anaxagoras and Castorice, but I have one more thing to say about Maidimos and I don't know where to put it, so I'm just gonna break immersion and eat it here. Although Maidimos is called the Undying and is virtually immortal, he does have an Achilles heel of his own. The 10th thoracic vertebra on his spine is Maidi's weakness and the only way to kill him. This is a secret he entrusts to Phainon and Phainon alone, so that the Deliverer could end his life if he ever succumbs to the Black Tide like Nikador. I am bringing this up because when Maidimos becomes a demigod and shows up to help the heroes defeat the Flame Reaver, who is definitely not Phainon, the Reaver aims 3 strikes directly towards Maidi's back, which Phainon ends up deflecting. Now, Maidi did tell Aglaia after the battle that he saw how he will eventually die with a blade to his back, which is another way of saying Phainon will kill him. But it is interesting that the Flame Reaver already knows this information. There is a trend that's starting to crop up in Amphoreus, and I hope it ends up being true because it's kinda funny. Have you noticed how whenever a Titan is introduced, the first 2 characters to find and talk to them are the Trailblazer and Castorice? They were the first to encounter Nicador when Mem sent them to the past of Castrum Kremnos, while in the Grove of Epiphany, they were the first to meet Cerces. Statistically speaking, something happening twice in a row does not suggest a trend. However, both Anaxagoras and Castorice are going to be playable in version 3.2, which means we'll learn more about their backstories as we did with Maidimos. Now, both of these characters have a lot to do with the concept of death. We know this thanks to Cerces, who reveals that Anaxagoras' current body is the walking shell of a dead man, and literally refers to Castorice as Aidonia's goddess of death. Castorice is the one destined to inherit Thanatos' core flame of death, and since we are learning more about her backstory soon, it only makes sense for the Trailblazer to accompany Castorice in meeting Thanatos. We are also shown the Trailblazer dying in her arms at the end of Light Slips the Gate, Shadow Greets the Throne, which, if you ask me, is a perfect excuse for the two to see Thanatos. Cerces also likens Castorice to a beautiful flower planted by the hand of Shadow in the mortal realm, which is an odd way to refer to someone who is known as a goddess of death and shadow of death, since flowers on a basic level are pretty much one of the most straightforward symbols of life. If you ask me to visualize the concept of life itself, the first thing that immediately comes to my mind is a plant's leaf, and the second thing is flowers. So unless you are talking about a specific species, most flowers at a baseline juxtapose death heavily. However, the longer I thought about what Cerces said, the more it made sense. You see, Thanatos is one of the three titans of Calamity, whom, as I explained earlier, gained a misleading negative association with the Black Tide over the years on Amphoreus to the point where their original roles were almost entirely forgotten. For instance, Nicador was the titan god of strife, yet through strife the lance of fury protected the world of Amphoreus from its enemies. And the same likely goes for Zagreus and Thanatos. The Hand of Shadow is one of the titans who succumbed to the Black Tide, but perhaps before losing his mind completely, he may have made a similar move to what Nicador did with Naias, where Thanatos planted a part of himself in the form of a flower, in the form of Castorice, so that she may carry on the titan's duty. Castorice says that Thanatos denied her her other half since birth, and this is why she wants to find the titan and reclaim this missing half. Towards the end of my first Amphoreus analysis, I pointed out a children's fairy tale told by Castorice where a princess transforms into a dragon, and I used it to rationalize the obvious conclusion of her other half denied by Thanatos being the dragon Memo sprite she summons in combat. Back when I made that claim, I did not realize that Castorice is based on one of the sons of Zeus, specifically from the Aetolian princess Leda, whom Zeus impregnated while taking the form of a swan. Yeah, Zeus do be freaky like that sometimes. And since she laid with a swan, Leda became pregnant with an egg, because that's clearly what happens when you lay with a bird. From this egg, Leda bore two sons, Castor and Pollux, or more simply Pollux. This is why Castor and Pollux are often depicted wearing egg-shaped caps in reference to the egg they hatched from. Castorice is Castor with some ice on top, which automatically means her dragon other half will be either Pollux or Pollux depending on which version the developers go with. When it comes to Anaxagoras, I think we can all agree that the guy will obviously be a critical player in uncovering the truth behind Amphoreus' biggest mysteries. Unlike Tribios and Aglaya, who put all of their faith into Castorice's prophecy, Anaxagoras completely rejects it. This is why he is depicted upside down in Mem's As I Have Written storybook. This is in reference to the fact that his ideas are the opposite of what everyone around him believes. His ideas are wrong, they are upside down, they are heretical. Now, do I think he is wrong? Well, no. Anaxagoras is probably one of the few people on Amphoreus who are correct. You see, Anaxagoras is directly inspired by the Greek philosopher with the same name who was considered a heretic during his era in ancient Athens for introducing several revolutionary ideas which went against the common line of thought. And what's funny is that a number of his revolutionary ideas either turned out to be correct or at least on the right path for his time. Anaxagoras was the first known thinker to propose that the moon does not emit its own light, but rather reflects the sun's light like a mirror. He also correctly explained solar eclipses as the moon passing in front of the sun and lunar eclipses as the earth casting a shadow on the moon, which, if you think about it, was absolutely massive during his era 2525 years ago. Anaxagoras also claimed that the sun was not a god but rather a star, and that it was larger than the Peloponnesus Peninsula. Technically he is correct, it is indeed larger. This heretical claim, combined with his close association with the influential Athenian statesman Pericles, led Pericles' enemies to use Anaxagoras as a scapegoat in an attempt to weaken Pericles' political influence, which I think will be applicable to Aglaia with the Council of Elders later. The only proposition that matters to us at the moment, though, is his idea of the nous, where he states that the nous, or cosmic mind, is an infinite, self-moving, and autonomous force which set the cosmos in motion and imposed order upon the primordial chaos. This idea carried over to Amphoreus' Anaxagoras, who is the founder of Nousporism, which, according to Castorice, is the theory that all beings originate from the same source and have a similar composition, the soul. This theory is likely to be extremely influential in the future, since so much of Amphoreus' story has to do with soul fragmentation or soul splitting. We see it with Nicador, Cyrene, and most obviously Tribios. In fact, Hyacinth, the future inheritor of Aquila's Coreflame of Sky and a Nousporist herself, suggested that Anaxagoras might be able to help Tribi out. After all, he managed to split his soul from his body and turn it into golden ichor. Just like with Fuli the Remembrance, Nous is also one of the 3 Aeons currently competing for dominion over Amphoreus' destiny, and this robot god was created by Genius Society member number 1, Xandar 1 Coabara. Yes, Xandar created an Aeon, and yes, he is one of the most important characters in the entire Hoyoverse, since he also proposed the theory of the imaginary tree, which I imagine will be relevant to Anaxagoras considering his connection to Nous and the path of erudition. Keep an eye on Anaxagoras, guys. I cannot overstate how important he will likely be in the future. Because remember that Welt and Sunday have already gone to seek help from Genius Society member number 83, Herta. The Herta. And do you recall what the Herta was trying to do before Welt and Sunday so rudely interrupted her? She was trying to contact Nous to ask the Aeon a question. Nous is by far the most likely candidate behind the divine prophecy that descended upon the world-bearing titan Kephali. But from the way Janus was talking before Tribios took the Coreflame of Passage, I have a strong feeling that the prophecy Kephali ended up receiving was heavily altered from Nous' original message. Perhaps it was altered by the Black Tide or other cosmic powers to drive Amphoreus into its annihilation. Don Hung and the Trailblazer speculate that Nanook's Antimatter Legion may be behind some of the events that took place on Amphoreus, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if a Lord Ravager is the one who corrupted Nous' original prophecy. Of course, if what I am saying is true, then this means the prophecy which Tribios received from the great Sky Father Kephali is a false one. And this must be an unbelievably grim reality that the Chrysos heirs and the entire world in general would have to contend with. I strongly suspect that Anaxagoras and Herta will work together later down the line from the inside and outside of Amphoreus to establish a connection with Nous and obtain the true prophecy to save the world. Who knows? Maybe after everything is said and done and Amphoreus is saved, Anaxagoras might even catch the gaze of Nous and become member 85 of the Genius Society. That would be really cool if it happens. Also, be very careful. I am not saying Nanook is the 3rd Aeon in Amphoreus along with Fuli and Nous. The presence of the Antimatter Legion and the Lord Ravagers does not mean Nanook has to be involved. I still think the 3rd Aeon is one of the 3 whom Black Swan suggests. Those being Long the Permanence, Mythos the Enigmata, or Hu the Equilibrium. I am sure many people must be wondering who helped Tribios escape Janossopolis and claim Janus' Coreflame, considering how the Trailblazer and Phainon couldn't have been there back then, especially the Trailblazer since the Nameless only showed up on Amphoreus after it was cut off from the rest of the universe. My current hypothesis is that it was Mem, since Mem can control time and influence the quote-unquote narrative of the world to some extent. And if you believe Mem is Cyrene, which is a very distinct possibility, then the one who helped Tribios should have been Cyrene. When the Sky Father Kefali went to slumber, the Holy Maiden of Yanosopolis, which at the time was Tribios' gentle mother, fell to her death. According to Phainon, these two events happened simultaneously, yet they were not connected. I actually think Phainon is wrong though, because if the Antimatter Legion really are meddling with Amphoreus like Dan Heng and the Trailblazer suspect, then the Lord Ravager leading them might have planned everything beforehand, including the assassination of Tribios' mother to deprive Yanosopolis of their holy maiden who could communicate with the Titans of Fate and decipher their words to the people of Amphoreus. Remember guys, Oronyx is one of the 3 Titans of Fate, and they believe the prophecy is false. They even say so to Tribios, who refuses to believe Oronyx due to her own convictions. When Phainon asks Tribios about how she, a weak, lonely girl, had the courage to embark on a long and arduous path to save Amphoreus, never looking back, never knowing if her efforts, suffering, and sacrifices would one day bear fruit, she replies to him by saying that fate isn't about the outcome but about the journey. The Chrysos heirs we know today are all relatively new. For most of her journey, Tribios walked and died alone, having nothing to push her forward besides the memory of her mother's faith and love. Faith is what defines Tribios, and this incredibly heroic answer she offered to Phainon is exactly why I believe that Tribios is a fool. The Flame Reaver is correct. The people of Amphoreus, especially the first 2 Chrysos heirs to ascend as demigods, Tribios and Aglaia, place immense faith in Kefali's prophecy, almost to a blind extent. Ever since the Trailblazer and Dan Heng arrived on Amphoreus, all they have heard is endless talk about the tripartite prophecy and the significance of the Flame Chase journey, about how the Sky Father Kefali gave humanity a divine mandate to slay the Titans, seize their authorities, and ascend as gods, so that they may bring about the world's rebirth in a miracle of Genesis. And the Chrysos heirs have sacrificed so much for the fulfillment of this prophecy. They have become so invested in it. Everything Aglaia does is for the sake of the prophecy, to see it through even at the cost of her own life. And Tribios already gave up her life time and time again, 999 times to be precise, because of her faith that her flame chase journey will one day lead to a better future at the end of the West Wind, beyond the black tide in the Sea of Flowers, where her gentle mother waits. But what if it's wrong? What if Oronyx was correct in telling Tribios that the prophecy she placed all of her faith in is false and heretical? That the Sky Father Kefali would never order humanity to slaughter his own kin? What if the Chrysos heirs' flame chase is all chasing nothing? Honestly, it's not even the Chrysos heirs whom I am worried about as much as the Deliverer, whom they chose to put all of their hopes in. What would he do if it is true that the prophecy is wrong? What would this hero do if he ever discovered that his people, who fought and bled for millennia, placing their faith in the promise of a better tomorrow, had sacrificed everything for nothing? If every struggle, every loss, and every life given so that their descendants would inherit a new and better world was all in vain? What would become of such a hero, in whom all the world's hope is placed, if he ever learns that his predecessors, his friends, and his family all died for the sake of a lie? I don't think the Flame Reaver is truly evil. From what I have seen so far, he seems to be gathering the core flames from the Titans and Demigods because he knows something our heroes don't. What that something is remains to be seen, but I do want to highlight that we never got to see how NOT-Phainon took the core flame of time from Oronyx. His actions may ultimately serve the greater good, even if that greater good comes at the cost of several lives along the way. So one has to wonder, how true this tripartite prophecy of Amphoreus really is. Amphoreus is absolutely magnificent, and I can't wait for the Trailblazer to take on the trial of Oronyx's core flame. Their first encounter with the Time Titan showed us their past with the Stellaron Hunters and caught the attention of Fuli's gaze, which is when we got Mem, so I can only imagine what incredible secrets the Trailblazer will uncover when they take on Oronyx's authority. It's also funny that the Trailblazer are the ones who help Tribios reach Janus, since Caelus in Roman mythology is the father of Janus, as I mentioned in my previous video. I should probably do an Aeon Titan and Greek god comparison at some point. At any rate, we have reached the end of this video. As always, a huge thanks to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon, and thank you for watching till the end. For now, I've been My Name for now, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.